Welcome to the We Are In It podcast. So, for those of you that don't know, Jalen is an incredible human being, and she's somebody that's currently an alumni from INIT. And we're gonna kind of dive into everything that she's worked on at Capital One and how she got into industry and all that fun stuff. But Jalen, take it away. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Hey, everyone. So I am Jalen. I graduated from FIU actually in 2022, December. I studied computer science and then quickly realized through in it, I was like, yeah, coding and software engineering is all cute and stuff, but I'm not really trying to do that for the next like couple years of my life. So one thing that was really important for me when I was in school was I still want to be creative in a way. So how could I do that, but also be in a place where I'm financially stable, not a hungry artist? And then through in it, they were like, hey, there's this thing called UX design. And I was like, tell me more. And so I went through the rabbit hole and here I am today. So I give a lot of thanks to Init for where I'm at.
It's so interesting because you kind of already knew that you had this kind of creative itch that you wanted to scratch. It's incredible that you were able to kind of mix, this thing that you already knew you were passionate about with something that people are willing to pay a really decent amount for, right?
Yeah, fun fact, I actually wanted to go to school for interior design, but that wasn't really popular
Hmm.
back in Miami. So I was like, okay, what else can I do?
I wonder what the alternate universe Jalen would have looked like as an interior designer.
I wonder too.
So besides that, like, can you tell us a little bit more about like your hobbies?
Well, some of you guys may know that I do content creating. I love to teach people and inspire other human beings that are interested in the creative space, specifically design. I do a lot of content creating around how to break into the world of UX design and how to just start, even if you don't know where to start, because there's a lot of information in the internet. Besides that, you can either catch me playing Sims, like a gross amount of hours on Sims, or working out and checking out the different Smithsonian's that are free around DC, which is such a nice perk.
Love it. And so, I mean, that actually explains how you end up getting into design, right? You're already designing like all these little people's lives.
That was definitely something I did growing up a lot. I'd play The Sims, but I wouldn't even control the people. I'd just be like, all right, this is what your house is gonna look like. We're gonna send you to a place where you can make money so that I can make your house really dope. Definitely at a very young age, I knew I wanted to do something creative, whether that's like interior design or just something within the word design. And I think it's important for me, design means like I'm taking these experiences and ideas that people are having and actually creating them and come to life. Whereas artists and other creatives output differently. So they're creating art for sending a message that they seem is related to them and is personal. So design's a little different from being an artist per se.
That's a very interesting point. I think one of the big things, like, and I really like this about your past, you ended up starting with interior design, but you still transitioned into something that was design related. So I think that's very powerful for people because sometimes they think, oh, like, he spent 6 years doing this other thing. I'm not gonna go to college and then transfer that in any way to tech, right? You worked on physical things in interior design. Do you feel like that some of that transferred over when you started doing UI UX design?
It can in some ways. I think physical design can play an aspect to it. For example, there's a certain section in Capital One that's called like in-person experiences. And so they mainly focus on building out and designing what the cafes look like, where they're going to place certain things, certain features or services that they're going to provide. And I think that if you come from an interior design background or like a physical design background, that could be a really great translation to like help them build out that experience of like what's the best way to get customers to come in intrigued about Capital One, maybe take a little coffee and like read a book or learn more about our services. So it could help, but I think the best thing about design is you don't have to know or understand what design is. I mean, it's such an ambiguous title as it is. But yeah, it's just like because it's so ambiguous, there's such a big opportunity to learn.
You can basically adapt it to any mindset. I like that. Speaking of design at Capital One, what's it like being a designer at Capital One?
I love being a designer at Capital One. Truly, I love the culture at Capital One. Honestly, the best thing so far from a student perspective, like just coming out of university, not having any experience in the industry or working in these big corporations, the fact that Capital was like, hey, we know you don't know much and you don't have much experience, but we see the value in your ideas and the way that your brain works. So we're going to do this rotation program where it's like, we'll offer you 2 years. You're still a full-time. You're not going to get like fired or have to get re-interviewed. We're just going to treat you as like you're learning, you are absorbing as much as you can so that when you are done in the next 2 years, you are really set up well for this corporate environment. Because it's definitely a little bit of some getting used to being in a corporate setting. It's a little bit intimidating at first.
Could you please say more? Because I think a lot of times, especially from the student perspective, when you're in university, you kind of have this idea, if I just get into X company, everything's going to be great and dandy, which is true in many ways. Your life upgrades, right? But there's some interesting stuff that you have to deal with. So, for example, like what's something that you had to deal with that was initially intimidating and how did you overcome it?
I love this. Okay. Literally, when I started Capital One, mind you, I started in August of 2023. And it was great. I was excited. But something that was a bit challenging was that when I got onboarded with my new team and my new manager, I just noticed that the expectations were a little bit too high for where I initially am coming in. Like, mind you, I'm just a student. I don't know anything. It's my first time. So it was a little bit challenging and it's a little bit intimidating because no one wants to talk to the manager to be like, hey, I'm still new and I think you're treating me a little bit too far in advance. Like, appreciate it. I'm glad you see that in me, but like, we're gonna need to tone it down. And so that was a little intimidating because it's like no one wants to tell their higher up that you just got here. But I knew that if I didn't do that, I was essentially going to set myself up for failure because I wasn't going to meet the expectation. I wasn't going to perform at that level because I'm just not there yet. And one thing that I also love about Capital One is people are so human. It's not like, I think that sometimes we think that people in corporate can be robotic, which is true. But for the most part, people are understanding, they're vulnerable. They're like, we totally get you. So it was a little intimidating to go and be like, hey, manager, you're great. I'm having a great time. But like, can we tone it back down and talk about like expectations and really kind of like set that bar of where we can meet in the middle? That was intimidating, but it actually just was so helpful to do that afterwards that now I'm like, me and her are like tight. She's like, girl, you run these meetings. And I'm like, thank you. Whereas before I was like, I'm scared to even ask you a question.
That is super relatable. There are so many times where, especially in that kind of position, when you have a manager, you want to, go to their bar. You want to show them that you have all this potential and that you can actualize that potential, that you can make it happen. But so many times, like you mentioned, like when you're just starting, they think you're here because that's what maybe they're used to. And it's your job to communicate to them that you're not and that you're learning, that you're seeking even mentorship, right?
Hmm.
Like that is such an important point to communicate. So I'm really glad that you were able to to do that because that's so critical, right? What about, for example, like the work that you're actually doing at Capital One? So let's say you have 4 hours uninterrupted to do something on Tuesday, right? What's something that could look like?
First, just to have 4 hours would be so lovely. I'm not gonna lie, and it's very funny. Alex, my partner lives with me. He was also an INIT alumni. He was like, because he just joined Capital One, he was like, hey, I just saw your calendar and you're literally have the craziest calendar I've seen in every one of my team. And I'm like, yeah, us designers are in pretty much meetings back to back from 10 a.m. because we all respect 9 a.m. We're like, nope, it's too early. So I'll have meetings from like 10 a.m., sometimes all the way up to like 4 p.m. And it really makes you think like, well, where do you find the time to sit down and do work? And I think death by meeting is everywhere in every company. But
Hmm.
as a designer, it's really important to balance your time, and it can be really hard to, like, it's way easier said than done. It's funny enough, last week I had a meeting with my team and I was like, hey, I love you guys. It's great to meet with you. Love the feedback you guys give me, but I don't want to see your face every day for like an hour when there's no need to, because then I don't have enough time to come back to give you quality work and get quality feedback because I just don't have enough time. Most of my days, I'm not kidding, it literally looks like me in meetings working with partners. When I'm in meetings, it's not like I'm just taking and absorbing a lot of information. As designers, our meetings are a lot of collaboration. So we're working with our product partners and understanding, hey, what are some requirements you're looking for in this feature that you want to build? We talk to our tech folks and we're like, hey, what's feasible? What technologies are you currently using and what's within our scope of work? So that's what half my day looks like. The other half, when I have actual heads down time, is me hopping on a Figma. So just for some context, I am working as both product designer and service designer. I'm either on Figma doing cute little designs for screens, or I'm working on big sticky board where it's like mapping out the end-to-end service or journey of a service.
I didn't even know that there was actually a differentiation between the two. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? So, for people that maybe don't know what the main differences are. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So the term UX, it's thrown a lot. You hear it everywhere, but it's an umbrella term. Like the word
Right.
doctor is, and you have like your cardiologist, whatever, whatever. So within, and I didn't know this. I actually learned this when I joined a corporation, which was in UX design, our main goal is, yeah, we want to create an experience that's smooth, intuitive for the user. But within UX design, there are so many little bits and parts that go into what that experience look like. So as a product designer, we mostly focus on what you think a UX UI designer is, or what you think a product designer is. We're hopping on Figma, we're making screens, we're doing prototypes, we're testing out with users, seeing how it works and makes sense, etc. As a service designer, though, I barely, if not ever, touch Figma, which is really funny because you would think that most UI UX designers are on Figma all the time, but that's not the case. As a service designer, I'm actually looking and talking to everyone backstage. So I'm trying to understand when the customer, I don't know, let's say buy a coffee. You want to buy a coffee at Starbucks. I'll be like, okay, let me see. I want to see from the moment you wake up and you think, I want Starbucks, what does that look like from the moment that you essentially put your money down and you receive that cup? Like, what does that look like? That whole journey. And then what we're looking for as a service designer is, where are there gaps? Where are there moments and opportunities that, hey, that wasn't too bad, but maybe we can make it better? Or we're like, hey, we noticed that you guys think this is a good solution, but really it's causing you more problems than if we did maybe this. So they're really just looking at a high level overview of the whole thing to make sure that there are no gaps. And if there are opportunities in those gaps, how can we use them? And there's so many other ones. There's like content designers, they focus on the words, kind of like copywriting. And then there's design strategists, which they strategize the design. I'm actually not sure so much what they do, so I can't speak on that. But there's a lot of different paths within UX design that you can take.
I don't think anybody knows what anybody in a strategy position actually does. In complete
Totally
fairness.
fair. No, totally fair.
Yeah, no, I had them all the time at Salesforce as well. I was like, strategy, interesting. What does that mean? But it's really interesting because as a service designer, it's all about the entire flow, right? The entire user journey. And as a UI UX designer, it's more about maybe specific steps in that journey and making sure that that step itself has a good experience. Does that encapsulate it?
Yep.
Awesome. So, given all that, how do you step into users' shoes, right? So that you can create the best product and feature decisions to positively impact them. So, how do you relate to other people? How do you empathize?
Honestly, it's sometimes hard, but a trick that I hear a lot of my other designers, coworkers say is that they just try to take themselves out of the situation. So it's not even so much about stepping into the user's shoes, because sometimes it can be hard to relate to certain groups. Like, for example, a lot of the work that I do is working with internal folks, so internal associates and employees and their process. So from time to time, I'm talking to fraud investigators and I'm like, I don't know how to be in your shoes. Like, thank you for showing me your whole process and explaining that. But I cannot relate. I don't get it. I'm wrapping my head around that. So from time to time, I really just try to like take myself out of the picture and just look at the process and see like, okay, this is what they're doing. And then I just try to understand as a whole, this is where they're getting frustrated. This is a pain point. Okay, perfect. This is where they're saying that I'm having a great time. They find it super easy. Great, that's a happy path. But it's really just about being like that third person be like, okay, this is kind of what's happening. There's no opinions, no thoughts, just like you're just observing to try and capture as much information as you can. If you have a lot of opinions and biases, so you might think, I'm looking at the fraud investigator open 3 windows and they're like, hey, this is my process. For me, it's more comfortable having 3 different windows. But then, as a designer, I'll be like, this is terrible. Why do you have 3? Why can't you just have 1? Or maybe we can do this. Those little thoughts can like distract you and stray you away from like what you need to capture within that user testing. So that's why sometimes I say it's just important to like pull yourself away and pull yourself back while you're doing these stuff, because it's just easy. We're humans. It's natural to want to have like opinions and be like, I know how we can make this better, but it's not about that. It's just about understanding like what the person is doing and how their process looks like.
Speaking of all these incredible skills that you actually employ while you're at Capital One, how did you kind of develop them? How did you even get into that spot? So many of the people are trying to become designers, just like yourself. What kind of things do you feel like set you apart? Yeah, that whole rabbit hole. Let's do it.
Okay, I will take you guys through my little rabbit hole journey. It was 2020, COVID just hit, everything went remote. My mom was like, hey, I know you're trying to be involved in school. I know you don't really want to go to FIU, but you're going. And you're doing the computer science thing. Someone I work with went to a student org in FIU that studies computer science. And I was like, Mom, that is so weird. Like lit, but very random. And I was like, okay, like I'll check it out. And so she gives me a printed sheet and it says, at the time, it was formerly known as UPE, Upsilon Pi Epsilon. And I was like, sounds like a frat. I don't know if I want to join this. And then I was like, well, we're online. It's okay. What's the worst that's going to happen? Like, I get direct messages from random people. It's fine. But I joined the Discord and I was like, wait, this is legit. This is super cool. Talked to a bunch of people there. And then they were like, hey, we have these different programs. I joined, what was it, Spark Dev at the time? Um, I joined Spark Dev, and it was through them, through that little team and that like 4-6 week project that I was on. They were like, hey, the team leads were super great people. But they were like, hey, we want to make this mobile app. We have these technologies, but if we want to make a good product, we have to focus and understand the UX side of it, the user experience, and design and understand like what we're going to design that to look like. And I was like, wait, you just said user experience and you just said design. Can we talk about that? And they were like, yeah, like there is a creative space within tech that you could be in. And I was like, oh, say less. So then I went to Googling and YouTubing a whole bunch of stuff. The thing that I think really set me apart was once I understood the foundation of UX design, I started doing like little courses. So like the Google UX course, understanding what projects look like for that from the course. I did some Udemy courses. And then once I had that, I started working on projects. Once I got my projects going, I created my portfolio. Once I got my portfolio in a good place, I started an interview, and I noticed that for the interview process, there was a whiteboard section for a designer. And I'm like, that I didn't even know that was a thing. So I was like, what does that look like? YouTube's. And I really think the thing that set me apart and how essentially I got the job where I'm at today is I had many mock interviews with different INIT folks. At the time, it was like the president, and then our social media director. I was like, hey, you guys are PM/UX designers. I would love to do like a mock interview with you guys, to do like a mock session of a whiteboard, get your feedback, see what I can improve, and then continuously doing that. And it was really helpful because once I got into the interview and I was doing the whiteboard, I was like, it was a little different from what we trained, but just having that practice was so helpful. And I think that they saw it. I went to the interview so confident. I was like, this is my projects. This is my portfolio. You want to whiteboard me? These are my results and ideas. And that definitely set me apart because I was confident. I knew what I was doing. I was passionate about the projects that I had on my portfolio, and I was just ready. Yeah, I think a lot of the skills are transferable. I think the one thing that set me apart was that I was definitely confident and I knew that I was going to be a designer in this field.
I love that. You had the confidence to leverage, this network that you ended up fostering, and that's how you ended up meeting the product manager and the UI UX designer to have these interviews that gave you real practice. But the other big point is you had to do many of them, right? It wasn't just two or three, and I think that's something
No.
people don't realize. It's like doing one mock interview before your big final interview is probably not going to cut it, right? It's iterations over and over again, right? You also mentioned your portfolio. What do you think makes a good portfolio for landing one of these opportunities? What goes into it, and what kind of inspired you to make yours?
Ooh, I love this question. I have a whole guide that tells you of like how
Oh,
to set up your
wow.
portfolio. But the three main categories are this. Problem statement, what you did, findings, what you learned, result, what you implemented. That's the thing. That's kind of like the structure of how I made my portfolio. There's a YouTube video of a Google UX designer who talks about the portfolio that got him into Google, Meta, Amazon, etc. And I was like, if that's the portfolio that got you into all those companies, I want to take that same format and transfer it to mine. And what I noticed is that was literally his portfolio. It was just him being like, this is the problem we have. For example, my problem was people don't want to go to showrooms to like look at a bunch of different furnitures, but no one has time for that. People want to do that, but no one really has time for that. So that's the problem I'm solving for. What did I do? Findings. I did a whole bunch of competitive analysis. I made little mock-ups to see what would work. And then my result was I created like a miniature sample that people would get shipped, which was a replicated to size model of like what the furniture they were looking at on the website, and they would just get shipped that. And so those were that was my result. So that's how I structured my portfolio. That's how I see a lot of portfolios are structured that ends up like, hey, I would like to talk to this person or just get more information about like what this project was about.
I see. I think when somebody hears the word portfolio, their initial thought is, for example, how a photographer might have like a picture portfolio, right? You have a competitive analysis, you have what is the problem that we're trying to solve, insights that you've gained from users, etc., and trying to, culminate into this product.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I think what a portfolio is doing is you're telling a story about a problem you solved that was true to you, that you liked. Because I think that sometimes where portfolios could get a little tricky,
Hmm.
especially with UX design, is that sometimes you may feel the need to put everything on your portfolio, which is cool. I mean, people do. Some recruiters are like, "That's cool, you did that." But they're looking at so many different portfolios and so many different people. They're only looking at it for like 5 to 10 seconds. So it's really important to understand what important information should be on your portfolio than like just putting all your information. That was my first portfolio mistake was I put all of my information on there and then I realized not everyone cares that much. So it's really about
Hmm.
telling a story. A lot of people use the STAR method to try and work and build their portfolio because they're like, how can I tell the story of this project that I worked on?
I love that. Thank you so much, Jalen. And for those of you that are interested, her in her guidebook and her socials will be linked below. Go ahead and check out Jalen and get some inspiration and land your dream job, whatever design position that you want. Thank you, Jalen. So to wrap things up, let's do a series of blitz questions. You ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So starting with, what are the top three books that you recommend for others to read?
Start with why from Simon Sinek. Oh, How to Steal Like an Artist. Yeah, Steal Like an Artist. Austin Kleon, I think his last name is. And then the
Hmm.
third one would be, I'm trying to look at my books to see which
Go
ones.
ahead. No worries.
I'd recommend The Design of Everyday Things. It's a
Hmm.
classic. Don Norman. It's a great book. I would recommend that as well if you want to get into specifically UX design, understand like what that world kind of looks like. I think he does a really good job of just showing you like, hey, everyone talks about UX design, but this is what really UX design is. Talks about doors and stuff.
Oh yeah, the poorly designed doors with the misplaced handles, right? Yeah, I love it.
Yep.
That's the good stuff. What is a favorite product that you recommend that you've recently discovered that you love?
I will show you these
Ooh.
cute little bookmarks. They're magnetic bookmarks, and yeah, I've been reading books, so I'm like, I don't want to have something sticking up, so I'm like, boop, it's just magnetic clips to the back, super cute, flat,
Love
and
it.
it has different little designs.
Very very design-esque. Love it. What is your favorite recent piece of content that you've been watching? Movie, show, social media channel?
I'm watching a lot of reality TV. I've been watching The Family Stallone. I've been watching Survivor. Love Survivor. It's such a good show. The Bachelor, Love is Blind. That's what I've been watching.
Those are all classics. Yeah, I've recently been watching The Bear and Shogun on Hulu. Hulu is killing it recently. They're
Love
really good.
Hulu.
Highly
Yes, and I
recommend.
did see The Bear. The Bear was so good too.
Oh my goodness. I think, something that people really find valuable. What is the one piece of life advice, motto, etc., that you hear yourself either internalizing over and over again or sharing consistently?
Yeah, it's actually really funny. This is something I had a conversation with my manager. Was today's Thursday? Yesterday, and we low-key got emotional in that call, which is really funny but different. Again, love Capital One because we're vulnerable like that. But it would be, don't put so much pressure on yourself. Slow down. You'll do fine. Trust in yourself, in life, in your beliefs. But yeah, just one thing I would tell myself now and even back then and in the future is just to don't put so much pressure on yourself to feel like you need to know or have everything ready in this moment.
Mm, I love that. And that's something I think we should all work on more. Thank you so much, Jalen.
Of course, thank you, Danny, for having me. This was a pleasure.